Terrifying secrets of my inherited farmhouse, the sinister red house that mustn't be acknowledged. Jess gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, as the cracked roads twisted through dense woods, leading her toward the monstrous structure ahead. The sinister red house loomed like a curse cloaked in secrets, whispering tales of darkness from its peeling paint and weathered timbers. Born of desperation, she had driven away from the city, from dirty looks and relentless bills. Jess envisioned a new life here, a burst of hope overshadowed by the weight of her inheritance. The farmhouse creaked as she stepped inside, the air stale and thick, stinging her lungs. Shadows danced against the walls, making the place feel alive, as if it was holding its breath, waiting. Memories of her father flickered in her mind, moments of joy quickly snatched away by their bitter estrangement. A chill raced down her spine, and when the locals averted their eyes, a shiver of suspicion crawled along her skin. Things that should not be acknowledged. The phrase echoed, taunting her like a child's cruel laughter. The townsfolk's warnings brushed against her thoughts, but she shrugged them aside, unwilling to fall prey to superstition. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the atmosphere morphed. Every creak of floorboards felt like a whisper, each gust of wind a breath of code, relaying secrets meant for her alone. At night, the sobs skittered through the hallways, turning her dreams to nightmares. Was it just her mind? Or was something else lurking? As days passed, Jess tried to build a safe haven for her son, Max. She brewed stories of heroes and adventurers to ward off his fears. Yet, an unsettling feeling gnawed at her gut, like cold fingers running along her spine. Every night, that feeling intensified as if 1,000 unseen eyes scrutinized her every move. She would drown out the echoes of anguish with Max's laughter, but panic gnawed at her as strange things began to happen. Windows glimmered and turned grimy, reflections of darkness that shouldn't be there, while whispers floated down hallways no one else seemed to hear. Then, like a storm breaking over a calm sea, chaos erupted. One evening, as twilight sank deep into the landscape, Max vanished. His laughter faded into apprehensive silence. Desperation curled around Jess like a noose as she sprinted through the house, panic morphing into dread. The sheriff, a wall of indifference, shrugged off her pleas, mumbling about lawn gnomes while Jess felt her sanity snapping like a frayed thread. The townspeople's silence was deafening, their eyes whispering complicity. Raging against the walls, she clawed at layers of her father's secrets, unearthing artifacts meant to stay buried, a weathered journal, its pages leaking truths that sent shockwaves through her soul. He had been ensnared in the wicked dealings of a powerful figure in town. Each revelation built a horrifying picture. This was beyond family drama, it was a puzzle of manipulation and fear. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jess stood at a blurring line between past and present, dread weaving around her as shadows thickened. The last dreadful connection unraveled just as an echo of childlike laughter pierced the silence, following it with an urgent, chilling whisper, "Help me, Mommy." Heart pounding, Jess pressed forward, driven by that thin thread of hope and terror clinging to her soul. The door at the end of the dark hallway beckoned ominously, and with every step, Jess felt the weight of something unnameable waiting just beyond. What was she about to uncover about her family and about herself? The air grew colder as Jess drew closer to the door, its surface splintered and warped, reflecting the chaos within her. The laughter echoed again, lighter this time, tinged with both innocence and fear. Max's voice, the lifeline that tethered her to sanity, drew her nearer, an unholy gravity pulling at her heart. With trembling hands, she reached for the doorknob, the metal icy against her palm. It turned smoothly, and the door creaked open to reveal a narrow staircase spiraling down into darkness. The flickering bulb above sputtered, casting terrified shadows that clawed at her ankles. Jess's heart raced, each beat a drumroll of dread as she peered into the abyss below. "Max!" she called, voice quaking but resolute. Silence swallowed her words like a hungry beast. She hesitated, a whisper of fear pooling in her gut. Was this a trap, a dark illusion crafted by the farmhouse? Yet, the giggle resurfaced, mingling with a soft, plaintive plea. In her gut, a surge of instinct propelled her down the stairs. The sense of damp earth and decay wafted toward her, each inhalation thick with the weight of despair. Shadows intertwined, twisting and warping like the tendrils of an unseen creature. What awaited her at the bottom? Footsteps echoed in the darkness. Were they hers, or did something else tread the worn steps? Panic clawed at her throat as she reached the last step and found herself in a cramped, underground room. Dull gray light seeped through a cracked window, illuminating a series of antiquated shelves brimming with dusty jars. Inside them floated remnants too grotesque to consider. In the center, a child-sized chair sat eerily empty, a delicate layer of dust covering it like a shroud. Heart racing, Jess scanned the room. "Max!" she shouted again, voice breaking. This time, a frantic rustle came from a corner. Hope flared within her, fierce and radiant. Sweat streaming down her back, she darted toward the sound, but stopped short as a figure slid from the shadows, and Jess recoiled. An old woman, her features twisted in horror, clutched a tattered doll in her skeletal hands. Wisps of white hair framed a face that resembled a haunting visage more than a human being. "Leave this place," the woman rasped, voice like gravel. "None escape what belongs here." Jess felt the air thicken, the very walls of the room closing in. "Where's my son? What have you done with him?" The woman's gaze flickered past Jess, her eyes wide with fear, but her body remained firm as if frozen. "They'll come for you too, he is not safe." Jess's heart plummeted. "What are you talking about?" Suddenly, lights flickered, and the shadows pooled with a horrifying life of its own, moving against the walls like black smoke. They stretched and coiled, seeking warmth, seeking flesh. Jess stumbled back, colliding with the woman, whose hands clutched her as if to anchor them both. "Run!" The old woman's scream shattered the thickening peace, her skeletal grip tightening around Jess's wrist. "They'll take your soul, just like the others." From the darkness, laughter swelled, the laughter of children, innocent yet tainted. With a final, desperate pull, Jess tore herself from the woman's grasp and dashed toward the staircase, but the shadows surged, cutting off her escape. Fear thundered in her ears as the gruesome whispers beckoned her forward, urging her toward a horrific revelation. "Max!" she cried, voice hoarse with panic, just as a hand gripped her ankle, tugging her down. A vision flashed before her eyes, the faces of those who had vanished in the town, their eyes hollow and mouths frozen in silent screams. Reality contorted, and she felt herself teetering on the edge of a void that was hungry. Jess fought against the pull, desperate to reclaim her son and her sanity. Racing thoughts twisted through her mind. Could secrets really bind someone to a place forever? Was her own family entwined in a history soaked in blood? As shadows surged around her, she gasped and found herself face to face with an apparition, Max, standing just out of reach. His eyes, wide and pleading, broke her heart. "Mommy, help me." But they were not alone. Eerie figures materialized behind Max, grinning maliciously, fingers twisting toward her like claws. Terror clutched at Jess's throat as reality blurred. She had come seeking answers, but it seemed the farmhouse had only chaos waiting. What truth lay in the darkness? What choice would she make between saving herself and risking everything for her son's freedom? Just as her courage faltered, the darkness surged forward, ready to swallow her whole. What would she discover when everything began to unravel? Jess's breath hitched as she hovered on the precipice of despair. The shadows lashed out, seeking her with a desperate hunger, each whispering promise of torment wrapping around her like a choking vine. "Max!" she shouted again, her voice cracking as she plunged into the darkness that enveloped them both, the echo of his name spiraling into the unknown. She fought to push through, heart pounding, adrenaline coursing through her veins like wildfire. Nothing mattered but her son. But the shadows danced, alive with malicious intent. They twirled and twisted, creeping up to her, smoothing their whispers into her ears. "Join us, join us." They cooed, slick and alluring, drawing her deeper into the void. Jess stumbled back, her feet tangled on the relentless cold ground, and she caught sight of Max, his tiny frame swallowed in darkness, his expression a mix of fear and longing. She couldn't lose him. Not like this. A rush of rage fueled her next move. She lunged forward, reaching desperately for him. A firm grip seized her wrist like cold steel. The old woman was back, her eyes now blazing with urgency, a twisted urgency that sent shivers racing down Jess's spine. "You cannot save him," she screeched, her skeletal hands shaking. "They will take you." "Stop!" Jess yelled, wrenching her arm free. "You don't understand. I have to save him. Your love will be the death of you." The woman's anguished cry resonated in the chamber, her face a portrait of fear. "This place feeds on that love. It will twist it, warp it." In that moment, Jess felt a wave of clarity wash over her. "What do you mean? What are you saying?" Panic began to form knots in her stomach where hope had previously dwelled. The woman's gnarled fingers lifted, pointing deeper into the shadows. "The cellar, it holds the truth. But be warned," she rasped, expression morphing into one of pure terror. "Once the door is opened, the past will uncoil before you, revealing horrors that shouldn't see the light." With every fiber of her being, Jess fought to regain control over her emotions. She needed to know what lay ahead. Could the darkness truly have answers? Was saving Max worth the risk? Jessie could feel the very fabric of time twisting around her as shadows clawed at her spirit. "Max!" She screamed again, her voice a raw, piercing howl that rumbled through the room. The walls seemed to quake under the weight of her desperation, and in that moment, Jess felt Max's tiny hand slip into hers warm, alive. "I'll take you to safety, Mommy," he whispered, innocence radiating from him, somehow unwavering in the face of the impending doom. But Jess could see it lurking behind the figures that mocked her, behind her son's bright form, their hollow eyes filled with glee. They would not let go easily. "Jess, come to the cellar with me," Max urged, his voice trembling but insistent. "We can't stay here." A final scream erupted from the old woman. "No. You don't understand. You cannot trust it. It's a trick. It wants you both." The shadows writhed and snapped, ready to pull Jess back into their fold. It felt like clawing despair wanted to drag her under, but she couldn't. She wouldn't. Jess tightened her grip around Max's hand, adrenaline-filled determination overtaking her fear. She had to find an escape route, a way through the darkness that wouldn't consume them. And then, in the periphery of her vision, she saw it, a door pulsing within the writhing blackness, a gleaming flicker of light. It beckoned her, daring her to step into the abyss. What lay on the other side? Could it lead to salvation or deeper horrors? Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, shadows thickened, snatching at her ankles and pulling her down. The laughter crescendoed, a multitude of whispering voices rising to a roar. "Help!" she shouted, knowing it was futile, her voice lost in cacophony. As the pulse of energy pulled her toward the door, one chilling thought struck her: what awaited them in the cellar could reveal a truth that was worse than they imagined. Would she find answers, or would it lead her to eternal darkness? "Mommy!" Max cried, the cry echoing in her heart as they were dragged toward the threshold. The darkness yawned wide before them, and Jess had to choose. Would they cross that threshold, or would they become the latest victims of the farmhouse's sordid legacy? The door creaked open, almost invitingly, its edges glowing with an unsettling light that flickered like flames in a dying fire. Jess's heart raced as she felt the pull, the shadows tightening their grip around her, trying to suck her back into the void. Max's little hand in hers felt like her only anchor in the turbulent sea of darkness. "Mommy, please." Max's voice trembled, breaking through the din of whispers. "We have to go." With a fierce resolve, she stepped forward, plunging into the light. Instantly, her world shifted. The chill of darkness fell away, replaced by oppressive warmth that wrapped around them like a thick fog. Jess's eyes widened, adjusting to the flickering illumination of the cellar. It wasn't just a cellar. It was a graveyard of secrets, cluttered with fragments of lives lived and losses buried. Old, dust-coated furniture lined the walls, stacked haphazardly as if forgotten in time. Shadows danced in the corners, lurking just out of reach, but within this cavern of memories, the air was thick with a kind of expectation. "Stay close, Max," Jess whispered, her voice barely rising above the low hum that echoed in her ears. As they moved deeper, the flickering light drew more focus, illuminating a worn photo of a family. Jess squinted, her breath hitching. The faces were familiar, yet distorted, as if twisted by grief and despair. She recognized them, her grandmother, a shadow of strength, and next to her, the smiling boy who looked unsettlingly like Mac's mommy. "Who are they?" Max's gaze drifted to the photo, confusion etching lines across his young face. I don't know," Jess stammered, her heart pounding. "But we need to keep moving." They advanced, determination battling with dread. The cellar seemed alive, the air crackling with whispers. "Join us," echoed in Jess's mind. The words felt like a caress, promising understanding even as they tugged at her soul. Suddenly, a low groan erupted from behind them, the door they had stepped through slammed shut with a deafening crack. Jess spun around, panic clawing at her throat, her fingers tightening around Max's hand. "What was that?" she gasped, eyes darting toward the shadows. Max shivered, a pinched whimper escaping his lips. I don't like this place." Jess turned back to him, forcing a half-smile despite her own rising fear. "Me neither, but we'll figure it out together. Just stay by me." Yet the shadows closed in, narrowing the path before them. Jess felt the palpable pressure of the darkness, as if it were a living entity, hungry for their fear. The echoes of muted voices intertwined in a chilling symphony, feeding on the tension. Unravel the truth against her better judgment. Jess pulled her son forward, drawn toward a flickering light as it pulsated from a small door at the far end of the cellar. It looked different, a faint, golden glow as if sunlight had been captured within. "Mommy, can we go back?" Max pleaded, his wide eyes brimming with tears. "No, Max. We need to know," Jess replied, barely recognizing her own voice, steeped in desperation. "I have to understand why we're here." As they neared the door, two figures emerged from the shadows, hollow silhouettes that swayed like drifting smoke. Jess froze, her skin crawling with instinctual fear. They moved closer, features obscured, yet their grins cut through the darkness, twisting into sadistic smiles that held more than malice. "You've come to join us," one raspy voice hissed. "You'll find the truth, or perhaps the truth will find you first." Jess's breath caught in her throat as the door creaked open wider, revealing a space cloaked in an ethereal glow. Was this the way out, or just another trap? Panic surged, and she glanced down at Max. His little frame trembled, silently urging her to protect him. "Mommy, let us go back," he cried again, trembling in fear. But Jess felt a fierce anger rising. She wouldn't back down now. Jess gripped Max's hand tighter and inhaled deeply. A decision lay ahead, one that could unravel them or reclaim their freedom. "Max," she whispered, determination surging. "We going in together." As they stepped through the threshold, shadows engulfed them, and the haunting laughter crescendoed, filling the cellar with a vibrant chaos. The hidden truth awaited, but at what cost? Would they emerge victorious or be swallowed whole by the nightmares of the past? A cold darkness embraced them, tightening like a noose, but Jess pressed on. She needed to discover the legacy that haunted her family. What awaited them inside? Was truth really worth the risk? The air inside the door thickened, nearly suffocating as Jess and Max crossed the threshold. The glow beyond swallowed them, revealing a room that felt more like a trapped moment in time than a space alive with breath. Dust hung in the air, swirling like tiny sprites, illuminated by the wavering light from an ornate chandelier that glimmered with sinister intention. "Mommy?" Max whimpered, looking up at her, his small body trembling. Should Jess hushed him, straining to listen. Whispering voices weaved through the atmosphere, a twisted chorus that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the flickering light. "Stay close," she said, her voice a fragile tether in the chaos. The walls around them were lined with faded wallpaper, its once vibrant patterns now ghostly and peeling. Along one wall, a series of portraits hung, each figure staring down with haunting eyes alive with the kind of memories that seep darkness. Jess felt the weight of their gazes pressing on her shoulders. "Can we go now?" Max tugged at her sleeve, his eyes darting nervously. "No, we can't," she whispered back, heart racing against the realization that whatever was here needed her attention. "We have to understand what all this means." As they inched further inside, the voices grew clearer, the words curling around her like barbed ivy. "You're almost there, find the heart we are waiting." Jess's breath hitched. Heart? What heart? A sense of urgency pulled her forward, fueled by an inexplicable drive that gnawed at her sanity. She could almost see the threads of her family's past weaving through the air, thick and tangible, begging to be unraveled. They passed underneath the chandelier, and suddenly crash. A heavy object fell from a nearby shelf, splintering against the floor with a heart-stopping clatter. It was a small, cracked mirror, reflecting a warped version of Jess and Max that sent a jolt through her. "Mommy!" Max cried, "Please let us go." But there was something intoxicating about staying, about seeing like a moth drawn toward a flickering flame. Jess offered him a reassuring squeeze. "I need to know why we're here, Max." Just a little farther the whispers swirled, urging her on. "It's just behind the door to truth." At the far side of the room stood another door, heavily carved and imposing. It throbbed with a pulse of its own, the wood glistening as if wet. Jess felt the gravity of it drawing her, but a prickle of doubt shot through her. What awaited them? "Please, Mommy, don't." Max's plea broke her resolve, but something inside her snapped. "We're going in, Max," she stated fiercely, pushing aside her own trepidation. She reached for the handle and twisted. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a darkened space that felt as if it were waiting for them. Jess hesitated. A glimmering flicker shot through her mind, a flash of her grandmother's warning, "Stay away from the truth, Jess. It'll consume you." A wave of dread washed over her. Was she about to do the very thing that would destroy them? The whispers intensified, clamoring for her attention, drowning out rational thoughts with their insistent beckoning. "Join us, find the heart." Max's grip tightened on her hand, a lifeline in the swelling darkness. She looked down at him, his face pale and stricken, and her heart clenched. The truth hung thick in the air, viscous and intoxicating. But at what price? Would understanding tether them to an unseen horror or set them free? Jess stood there, frozen, heart pounding in her chest. The moment stretched painfully, filled with dread and longing despite the cries for caution echoing in her mind. With one deep breath, she stepped inside, darkness enveloping them like a shroud. What would they discover? Did the truth await them or merely a deeper, darker abyss? The shadows whispered malevolently, "You've just begun and now you can never turn back." The door clicked shut behind them with a finality that sent chills racing down Jess's spine. The shadows in the room deepened, curling around her and Max like cold fingers. She squinted, trying to make sense of the inky blackness that enveloped them, but her efforts were met with only an expansive emptiness that swallowed the light of the chandelier whole. "Mommy, I can't see." Max's voice trembled, a fragile whisper in the overwhelming silence that followed. She couldn't reassure him when her own heart pounded like a trapped bird in her chest. "Just stay close, Max." The dagger-like edges of fear pricked at her nerves. They shuffled forward, Jess's hands outstretched, feeling the walls close around them like the jaws of a beast. The air grew colder, biting at her skin, and a scent of decay washed over her, making her stomach churn. She pressed her palm against a surface wood, slick with moisture, and something else, something sticky and warm. "Mommy!" Max cried, taking a step back, fear bright in his eyes. Before Jess could respond, a flicker of light ignited at the far end of the room, stark and clear. She turned, drawn toward it as if under a spell. The whispers returned, louder this time, a cacophony of voices serenading her with fragmented words. "You must see, you must know, Mommy, please." Max's grip felt too small, too fragile to hold on to. But the light pulsed, a heartbeat of its own, and she urged him along. She couldn't stop now. As they approached the source, the light morphed and shifted, revealing a mirror but not a simple mirror. This was immense, clad in ornate gold filigree, and it glowed like an ember, dancing with shadows that moved independently of the walls. "Look," it beckoned, the included voices morphing into one seductive, syrupy tone. "Look and learn." She hesitated, but something deep within clawed at her to step closer. As she did, the mirror's surface rippled, and a vision emerged, her grandmother's face, twisted in a rictus of horror and despair. Jess gasped, instinctively pulling Max closer. "No, Mommy, I don't want to look," he squeaked, his wide eyes darting to the glowing image. Jess felt her own terror reverberate in her chest. How could she protect him when she felt so utterly lost? "Shoo, it's okay, sweetheart." But her voice wavered, betraying the panic roiling just beneath the surface. The reflection warped, showing scenes of a dark family history, echoes of tragedy that played out in flashes, visions of sorrow etched in the fabric of their bloodline. Each flicker threw daggers of fear through Jess. "Stay away from the truth. It'll consume you," echoed her grandmother's warning. But she couldn't turn away. Suddenly, a cold breath ghosted the back of her neck, and a chill coursed through her veins. The light in the mirror changed color, shifting to a cold blue, mimicking the eyes of something lurking just beyond reach. With a tremor, she stepped back. "We need to leave. Now." Jess turned, yanking Max along as panic clawed at her throat. But the door they had entered from had vanished, replaced by a solid wall, the once ominous wooden barricade transformed into an unyielding stone. "Mommy, I don't like this," Max whimpered, pressing against her side, his small body shaking. "We'll find a way out," she exclaimed, desperation leaking into her voice. But a heavy silence wrapped around them, the darkness pressing tighter, filled with their breath. And the whispers, now a relentless torrent, surged louder. "You've come. You've seen. The heart will claim you." Nausea rolled over Jess as the mirror darkened again, morphing into a portal, a doorway to something more sinister than she ever imagined. "What will you sacrifice to find the truth?" the echoing voice asked, chilling her to the bone. Jess felt as if the ground had dropped out beneath her. Whatever vendetta lay in the shadows was now hungry for her, insatiable. What would they leave behind in pursuit of the answers? "Mommy, I'm scared." Max's voice was barely a whisper, and Jess realized the truth. They might not leave this place if they didn't act, and soon. As she frantically searched around for an escape, the mirror pulsed again, beckoning with a new horror. Choose: would they be able to face the darkness, or would they succumb to its call? The fear sank like lead into the pit of her stomach as she grasped Max's hand tighter. "Max, we need to find the heart," Jess barely breathed. But all around them, the voices sang, crowing, you're too late, you're too late. The air hung thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that enveloped them in its sinister embrace. Jess's mind raced, her heart thudding against her ribcage as the walls of the room seemed to constrict, closing in like a vice. She could almost hear the whispers begging for her attention, the specters of her family's nightmares swirling around them, urging her to dive deeper into the abyss. "Mommy, please let us just go." Max's plea pierced her thoughts, and she focused on his small face, illuminated by the flickering edges of the mirror's light. His once bright eyes were now clouded with fear, and that image alone fueled her sense of urgency. "I won't let anything happen to you, Max," she declared, though doubt gnawed at her resolve. The whispers intensified, their tones rising and falling like a sinister wave, filling her with dread. The mirror, a portal of truth and terror, pulsed just inches from her face, luring her to confront whatever lay behind its shimmering veil. She took a cautious step forward. The reflections morphed, revealing nightmarish visions that stole the breath from her lungs. Shadows danced within the glass figures, twisting and contorting, their faces masks of anguish. Ghostly images from her family's past materialized, dark figures carrying torches, shadows of sorrowful celebrations, and the frantic echoes of voices crying out for help, trapped in time. "Mommy, I can't look anymore." Max clutched at her dress, his small fingers digging in as he bared his teeth against his cries. "Stay strong, Max, please," she responded, her own voice trembling. But each moment she lingered felt like an eternity spent staring down a corridor of despair. She had to remember her reason for enduring this darkness, to protect him. Then, with a jolt, the mirror stopped shifting. Its surface refracted a single image, a towering, menacing figure draped in shadows, coated in a macabre aura. It stood just beyond a door that Jess had never seen before. Within the reflections, the shape familiar yet foreign, twisting memories of lost family. "Open the door," the whispers chanted, a dissonance echoing through the room like the faintest hints of laughter. As if pulled by an invisible force, her feet moved toward it against her will. The surface felt cool and smooth as she brushed her fingertips along the edges. A sudden crash echoed somewhere in the darkness behind her. She whipped around, heart racing, but there was nothing. Just an empty void. "Mommy?" Max's voice trembled, shaking her from her trance. What if it's not safe?" "We have to be brave," Jess responded, though she could scarcely believe her own words. "This could be our way out." With a deep breath, Jess pushed open the door. As it creaked slowly, the hinges released a haunting wail, revealing a corridor swallowed whole by shadows. A faint light flickered at the far end, illuminating what looked like a staircase spiraling upward. "What's up there?" Max asked, eyes wide. I don't know," she admitted, fear clawing at her throat. It felt wrong, so wrong to venture further into the unknown, yet doing nothing felt just as terrifying. In that heartbeat of hesitation, a sudden, chilling breeze swept through, whispering secrets only the damned could understand. The mirror's surface vibrated, nearly shaking free from its framework, and with a sudden shock a face emerged, strikingly similar to her own. A younger version of herself, eyes wide with terror and desperation, her lips forming the word, "Help." "What do we do?" Max's voice broke into desperate gasps. "I want to go home. Just hold on tight," Jess cried, pulling him closely as they both peered into the abyss. Heart racing, she turned toward the staircase. They had to face whatever awaited them, despite the icy grip of dread tightening around her heart like shackles. But as Jess took the first step, the whispers changed, loud and frantic. "You've chosen, you must pay the price." A hollow laughter erupted, sending chills down her spine. The walls trembled as if reacting to the sound, causing dust to rain from the ceiling. Jess froze. "What? Price?" Max's small hand slipped from her grasp, and she turned just in time to see him recoil in shock, his eyes wide with terror. Something lurked behind her, something far worse than the whispering shadow, something alive. "Max! No!" Jess screamed, reaching out for him, but the darkness swallowed him whole, and an agonizing silence returned. "Mommy," a barely audible whisper floated through the shadows. Her breath caught in her throat as panic surged. She stepped back, dread hanging like a noose around her neck. They were running out of time. Suddenly, tears streamed down her face as realization struck. To find whatever she had to find, she must delve deeper into the darkness and pay the toll that was demanded. As echoes of Max's fading whimper hung in the gloom, she clenched her fists, determined to fight the darkness head-on. But would the truth and sacrifice she faced save him, or would it consume them both? Jess stood at the foot of the staircase, the air thick with a stench of decay that made her stomach churn. The flicker of light above shimmered strangely, casting elongated shadows that danced mockingly along the walls. Each step she took echoed, the sound swallowed by the thick fog of despair that wrapped around her, heavy and suffocating. She couldn't shake off the feeling of eyes watching from the dark corners. "Max!" she called, her voice breaking, clawing at the silence. No answer came but the backfiring echoes of her dread. Each syllable felt like a plea tossed into an endless well. A soft, muffled sound broke through the thick silence, a giggle. Her breath caught. Was it real, or was she losing her grip on sanity? The light above flickered again, and with it, the chuckle transformed into a cacophony of distorted laughter. It was mocking, a perverse celebration of her fear. She pressed on, the cold steps biting at her bare feet like icy fingers. As she climbed, her mind raced. Max was out there, alone in that suffocating darkness. She couldn't let the shadows claim him. The sinister laughter began to swell, a tide of malicious glee that clawed at her resolve. She reached the top, where the staircase opened into a narrow hallway, lined with doors that breathed secrets and despair. Her heart thundered, each beat a drum echoing in her ears. Jess reached for the nearest door, her hand trembling. It felt cold under her palm. The whispers rose again, urging her to open it, yet a part of her screamed to turn back, to flee from what lay in the depths of this nightmare. Behind her, a heavy thud resonated through the corridor. She spun around, her pulse racing, only to find emptiness. Fear coiled around her heart. She had to move. She couldn't let whatever was behind her gain ground. She yanked open the door. The room within was suffused with a haunting blue light, shadows writhing like phantoms. Old furniture lay scattered, stacked high with relics of a forgotten past. She stepped inside, her breath hitching at the sight. Pictures lined the walls, every frame a frozen scream or a twisted grin. They were family portraits, faces she half remembered, twisted in emotions that conjured terror and sorrow. Then she spotted one image that made her blood run cold, a picture of Max, standing bright and vivid, eyes wide and terrified, the same laughter echoing behind him in the frame. It didn't make sense. How was this possible? He shouldn't be here. "Mommy," the voice echoed, clear and desperate. "Max." Jess lunged forward, yanking at the picture frame, desperate to pull him back from the abyss. But instead of freeing him, the image pulled her in, causing the room to spin around her. The whispers grew deafening, roaring in a frenzy, merging with the laughter that now engulfed her senses. Struggling against the force trying to entrap her, Jess stumbled backward, her feet slipping on the wooden floor. She fell to her knees, panting, heart pounding like a war drum. The room shook, and everything went dark for a heartbeat, swallowed in a chaotic blend of sound and light. As reality flickered back, the door slammed shut behind her, locking her in this futile shadow realm. Panic surged through her veins. She had to keep moving. With renewed determination, Jess scanned the room, heart racing. There had to be another way, another door, a hidden way to free Max. Suddenly, she heard a soft cry, barely a whisper but unmistakable. It was coming from deeper inside this twisted place. "Mommy," the voice propelled her forward. She had to follow it. But with every step, dread unfurled in her chest, warning her of the dangers lurking just out of sight. The walls seemed to pulse, inching toward her, filled with malice, as shadows crawled along the perimeter of her vision. What awaited her beyond the next door? A truth that could shatter or save? Jess hesitated, drowning in uncertainty. The laughter swelled again louder, more sinister, filling every crevice of her mind. She had no choice. She couldn't let fear consume her. As she grasped the doorknob, the whispers surged, an ominous chorus chilling her to the bone. You'll regret this. But in that instant, Jess realized time was running out, and with a deep breath, she turned the knob, feeling her heart race. What lay beyond could either be salvation or her final descent into madness. Would she be able to save Max, or would she, too, be lost forever? The door creaked open, revealing an unspeakable darkness. Jess took a tentative step forward, swallowing hard as she plunged into the abyss beyond the door. The darkness enveloped her like a wet blanket, clammy and oppressive. She strained her eyes, but it was as if the void was mocking her. It felt alive, pulsating with a dreadful heartbeat, thrumming in rhythm with her terror. As her breathing quickened, the chilling silence suffocated her senses. Max, she whispered, hoping the name would cut through the shadows. The darkness rippled, a strange flutter, as if something had heard her. Suddenly, a faint glow flickered ahead, a shimmer of glinting eyes, reflecting something primal. Jess froze. Was it Max? Or something much worse? Her instinct screamed to run, but a shivering curiosity rooted her in place. The light flickered, then vanished. "Mommy," came the voice again, closer this time, yet somehow warped. It was twisted, echoing from the very walls around her. It was a chilling rendition of her son's plea, distorted to mock her resolve. She shook her head, grappling with fear and hope intertwined. "I'm coming," she shouted, her voice breaking as she stepped deeper into the darkness. Each footfall resonated like a drumbeat, loud and urgent, each echo amplifying her dread. Suddenly, shadows darted past her, silhouettes flickering at the edges of her vision. They couldn't be real, could they? She blinked rapidly, trying to dispel the illusions, but the shadows coiled around her, creeping closer, their whispers a frenzy of incoherent taunts. Jess's heart raced faster, thundering against her ribcage. "I'm not afraid," she yelled into the void, though her voice wavered. Panic clawed at her throat, threatening to strangle her resolve. A terrifying thought pierced through her mind. What if she was already too late? What if Max was gone forever? The darkness seemed to respond, shifting ominously, and with it, the shadows solidified into shapes, figures cloaked in black, their faces obscured but their intentions clear. They swirled around her, closing in, a silent audience to her fear. Jess took a step back, nearly stumbling. "Stay away," she shouted, raising her hands instinctively. One of the figures stepped forward, the outline barely discernible. It felt ancient, like something ripped from folklore, eyes glowing with an unsettling hunger. Jess felt the weight of its gaze, suffocating her resolve. "You can't save him, child," it hissed. Its voice dripped with malevolence, chilling her to the bone. "No!" Jess screamed, heart pounding furiously. "I want to let you take him." Just as hope began to flicker out, a flash of white appeared in her peripheral vision, a doorway, barely outlined in the thick darkness. "Max!" she called, forcing her legs to run towards the light. The figures recoiled, their whispers rising to a deafening crescendo as she sprinted, the sound echoing darkly in her ears. But just as she reached the light, something cold pulled at her ankle, tripping her up. She fell to the floor, the impact jarring her senses. The figures swarmed around her, their laughter a cacophony that shattered her mind, breaking her will piece by piece. With a desperate cry, Jess clawed at the cold ground, kicking and flailing, fighting against the encroaching darkness. "Leave me alone." She scrambled toward the light, clawing her way through the bodies swirling around her like a cyclone. Too close now to give in, she lunged for the glowing doorway, her fingers grazing the threshold just as a shadow latched onto her wrist, pulling her back. The grip was like ice, paralyzing her. She screamed, but the sound seemed to echo into nothingness. The doorway flickered, a wave of warmth and hope beckoning her. She couldn't give up. With a surge of adrenaline, she twisted her wrist free and lunged forward, tumbling into the light. As she crossed the threshold, the darkness tried to pull her back, the laughter now mixed with screams, a dissonant melody of anguish. She hit the ground hard but rolled to her feet, gasping for breath, her heart racing as the chaos swirled behind her. Jess turned, facing the door she'd just emerged from. It opened just a crack, shadows spilling through, reaching for her. Fear gripped her like an iron vice. Was she truly safe? She hardly had a moment to ponder before the door slammed shut with a final, resounding thud that vibrated through the air. Ahead lay a narrow path, faintly illuminated, leading deeper into the unknown. The shadows may have lost this round, but Jess knew they were relentless. "Max! Where are you?" she called, urgency propelling her forward. But as she moved away from the echoes of despair, another sound took its place, a soft, high-pitched giggle, floating on the air, intertwining with her every thought. "Mommy," the voice lured, taunting her, but now it was mixed with something else, something sinister. Jess pressed onward, but a chilling dread settled into her bones. What have I awakened? The laughter faded, leaving a chilling silence. Just ahead, the path opened into another chamber, the shadows beckoned. What waited for her there? Would her next choice bring her closer to Max or to her doom? Jess stepped into the new chamber, feeling the weight of anticipation and dread collide within her. The space was vast and dark, the walls pulsating as if alive, echoing her uneven breaths. Flickers of dim light hung like whispered hopes above her, casting grotesque shadows that danced along the rough stone surface. "Max!" she shouted, her heart hammering inside her chest, the fear that he might not answer clawing at her insides. But her voice bounced back to her, an echo thrown back by walls familiar with despair. The absence of her son's laughter caused a panic to solidify in her throat. "Mommy," the voice danced lightly on the air, a taunt dressed in affection. She chased the sound. "Max!" The shadows twisted, flickering malevolently as if mocking her quest. Driven by a mother's desperate love, she pressed forward, her pulse racing with adrenaline. In the center of the room loomed another mirror, larger and more elaborately framed than the last. Even from a distance, she could sense it calling to her, drawing her in with promises of truth sacred and cursed. "Don't look at it," came a sudden rasping voice, cutting through the air like a knife. Jess spun to find the old woman from before, her face livid with urgency. "It holds your son and it will consume you both." "Where is he?" Jess cried, feeling tears burn her eyes. "I must save him." The woman shook her head vehemently, her skeletal hands trembling. "You have no idea of the price, child. The truth here runs deeper than you think." But there was no room for hesitation. Jess's love for Max surged, an overwhelming fire igniting her courage. "I can't lose him." One foot moved toward the mirror, pulling her closer to its shimmering surface, despite the warnings that rang in her ears. "Mommy!" Max's hauntingly familiar plea echoed through the room once more, drawing her in, pulling the strings of her heart. And just like that, her fear shushed, overshadowed by an all-consuming need to reach him. She blinked, taking another step. It was not just a mirror but a connection her family's history reflected, drawn from the very essence of pain and sorrow. Images flickered, moments stolen, lives fractured, endless cycles of despair. "Please, don't." The old woman's voice cracked in despair as shadowy tendrils reached up from the mirror's surface, weaving around Jess like creeping vines. But Jess tore her gaze away from the labyrinth of images only long enough to face the woman once more. "I won't abandon him. I can face the truth." Seizing her courage, Jess stepped forward. Each breath felt heavy with the weight of sacrifice as she reached for the mirror's surface. The cool texture sent a shudder through her, and in an instant, the shadows enveloped her entire being. Jess gasped as the world around her shattered, flinging her into a kaleidoscope of memories, her grandmother's dying words, tales of love twisted into darkness, shadows of her past ingrained within the fabric of her family lineage. And at the heart of all these images was a child, her child. "Mommy!" Max cried again, desperation filling the suffocating air. She spun at his voice, the frantic sound pulling her away from the memories, as if time had reversed. There he stood only a few feet away, bathed in a gentle light and surrounded by a swirling fog of shadows. But with each fleeting blink, the light flickered, darkened, then threatened to reclaim him. "Max!" Jess cried, lunging forward. As she reached for him, the mirror's horrific visage morphed into a darkened maw, emitting a sound like thunder. "You will not take him." The malevolent voice thundered, sending vibrations through Jess's body, as shadowy figures converged, clawing at her limbs. "Mommy, help!" Tears streamed down his cherubic face, a harrowing sight that shattered Jess's spirit. The darkness roared, echoing her fear and threatening to consume them both. With a final surge of resolve, Jess screamed, "I will break this cycle." Digging deep into that well of motherly strength, she wielded it like a weapon against the encroaching darkness. "I will save my son." Driven by love, her will igniting like a volatile flame, Jess reached through the chaos, grasping at Max's hand. The shadows recoiled, instead stretching thin under her defiance. "Do you truly think love can conquer the shadows?" A figure loomed darkly behind them, mocking, but Jess remained steadfast. "Yes. It has to." She held tight to Max's warm hand, fearlessly stepping back into the light streaming from the other side of the mirror. With blinding intensity, the shadows shrieked, echoing grief of those trapped within. Her heart raced. The specters of anguish clinging to her began to fade, torn away by her fierce determination. Light radiated, it broke like a dawn scattering the night, pushing against the darkness that threatened to consume their essence. Jess pulled Max toward her and stumbled backward, crashing through the mirror as the shadows shattered around them with a deafening wail. They landed hard on the ground, sputtering and gasping. The dirt beneath them felt raw and liberating, and above them, the night sky gleamed, stars twinkling like scattered jewels. "Mommy," Max whispered, his small body trembling against her. "I'm here, love. I'm right here," she reassured him, pulling him into her embrace, her heart swelling. They were free. From the shadows, the farmhouse loomed in the distance, quiet now but still watching. Jess felt a shiver run down her spine as she looked back, the weight of the inheritance melting into realization. The history they had uncovered didn't have to dictate their future. "Let us go home," she whispered, squeezing Max's hand tight, a promise of safety and nurturing love. The warmth of hope glowed in her heart. Together, they turned and began to walk down the gravel path, memories of pain replaced by the strength of love, knowing the shadows could no longer claim them. As they disappeared into the horizon, the farmhouse faded behind them, a relic of knowledge lost to time. They had chosen light. They had chosen love. Finally, they were free. Now, this is where you come in. You need to subscribe now. Don't miss our next exclusive stories, they're just around the corner. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Leave a flood of comments below with your reactions and theories about this wild conclusion. And for real, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. Your support means everything. Let us keep this journey alive together.